requirement of creating a will is having the right mental capacity. Many times we put off creating or putting certain things in place because you might think that we have time. But from the time you lose your mental capacity, that also puts you in a difficult position because you now cannot create a will or do anything in your own name on your own or sign off on anything at all because you wouldn't have the required mental capacity to do so. You also must also have the will witnessed by two persons. And it must be in writing and must be signed by both the witnesses and the testator. And that is why we also mentioned that you shouldn't do certain things on your own, because in creating the will, it's important to have an attorney assist you in doing this so that who is aware of the legal requirements for creating the will so that they can ensure that it's all done correctly so it does not become invalidated when it goes through the court process.
We will share a story with you. I know you might think mental incapacity, that only happens to elderly persons. Only elderly persons get amnesia or dementia, but it could be any mental incapacity. We have experienced where a person got into an accident and had amnesia, and certain things needed to be put in place. And that was a young person, and certain things were not put in place. Hi, we have a hand. You had a hand up. Hi.
With respect to the witnesses, what you just said, you need two witnesses, but I was here to understand. I was here to understand that if the witness happened to be a beneficiary, then that body cannot be a witness. Is that true?
That's absolutely true.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just
Hence
wanted
the
to
reason why we're urging each of you to make the decision to seek legal counsel on these particular things, because that is a crucial part of who you select as your witnesses. Beneficiaries cannot be witnesses in any will because they will not be entitled to benefit.
Right, so really and truly the witnesses need to be independent from the will. So it's best to have a person not benefiting from the will. It calls into question the validity of the will, if they were influenced in any way. Oh.
Can you raise another question?
Okay.
Yes,
we can have questions after.
Okay, so Shana, you were speaking about a scenario.
I lost my train of thought.
Yes. Amnesia,
Right.
yes.
A young person had amnesia, and their prognosis was that they would never be the same again. And I bet you at her young age, she never thought that she would be in a position that she needed a will or needed estate planning because she was still very young. But as I mentioned, illnesses and death are so indifferent. It really doesn't matter what age you are. And it's best that if you have someone to protect, you have a valuable asset, to start putting things in place and thinking about it and assessing those circumstances that we mentioned.
And another situation that we face sometimes are persons who make decisions out of certain grudges that they might have. We understand that there are certain family disputes or certain friend disputes that we might experience, and we might decide, you know what, I'm going to take this person out of my will. Let's say you make that decision today to take that person out of your will. You make up probably the following week. Something happens to you where you would have lost your mental capacity and you cannot change your will. Then it puts you or that beneficiary at a disadvantage because of a temporary emotion at a particular time. So be mindful when we are making certain changes as to the impact that it will have in the long run.
Well, we all live in Barbados, and we know that we could get very petty. We know persons that say, well, my son ain't behaving too good right now. I don't want him to benefit from my estate at all. Next week, we see her and the son hug up, right? And we just say, like, well, then she come back, I got to put it back in because, we made up. I'm not saying that it can't be done, but everything has a cost. And you want to make sure that you're making the decisions not out of emotion, that you're really sitting down and assessing your circumstances. Am I vexed right now, or am I vexed for life? Right?
So in speaking about a will further, let's speak about what assets to consider. We mentioned a lot of assets earlier, and some intangible, some tangible, interest in property, and that is a particular interest in property is a particular area that we realize some persons might not necessarily be mindful of. Interest that might not necessarily be in a realized asset in your hand, but you are entitled to benefit from at some point in the future. Shannon would have mentioned that, let's say you would have been entitled to benefit in someone else's will, and that is in the process of being finalized. You are entitled to receive the benefit of an asset. And in creating the will, it's important that we take consideration of that particular asset or all other assets that you might have, but also the interest that you are expected to receive. We also have situations of joint assets. In marriages, of course, some of us might have accounts opened. Some of you might have joint ownership in land and property. Those factors are also something to consider, because a lifetime step could be in terms of purchasing the property together. You all jointly came together and said, let's purchase this property. And you might decide to purchase as what we call joint tenants. And as joint tenants, what that means is on the death of one person, automatically the ownership of the property passes on to you. With respect to the other type of joint ownership, there is joint tenancy. I'm not sure if any of you would have had that experiences in any legal documents. But the joint tenancy arrangement, it means that your ownership has been severed and both of you each equally own a section of the property. So that means that on your death, your share automatically goes to your estate and your spouse's share will go to his. So it's separated.
So it all comes back. You're identifying these assets, you're looking through the legal documents, you're looking to assess, I own this property with Anika, how do Anika and I hold this property? So you're going home, you're thinking about, how do I own this house with my husband? You're looking through the title document to your property, and you're realizing like, oh, Anika mentioned joint tenancy, so we own it as joint tenants. If God forbid your husband had to die tomorrow, it automatically goes to you. But if you see tenants in common, you're realizing like, oh, so it means I might need to start putting things in place, because we don't own it as if he had to die tomorrow, it will automatically go to me. I now have to deal with his half.
And the reality is we see a lot of persons make this assumption, because we own the property jointly, automatically it is mine on the death of one spouse. But we have to ensure that we assess whether legally in your documentation the type of ownership is in the same as respect to joint tenancy, where you actually will own the property automatically, as opposed to the other form of joint ownership, which requires the further step of ensuring that it's taken care of in your estate plan.
So we talked about the assets. So we're all on track of preparing this will. And we have to put someone in place that after I die, they're going to make sure that my beneficiaries get their asset. And that person is called an executor. Now that person could be a beneficiary, but it doesn't need to be. And that person will ensure that the assets go to who they need to go to, that those debts that Anika spoke about are paid, and everything is in order for your behalf. So with that responsibility, since you are not here, that definitely has to be someone that you trust, right? Usually it's a beneficiary because it's someone close to you, but it doesn't need to be. Just someone that you trust that will put those affairs in order.
And also, please tell the executors, because some persons we would have experienced end up putting names on the document and don't ever inform the persons in the document that they have that responsibility. So then we end up with a situation where the will stays there and no one actions the things that they're supposed to. So it's important you let persons know, and also advise as to the real responsibility when it comes to being a part of the will as an executor. And those real responsibilities include being mindful of the possibility of certain expenses that will be required before the will can be processed through for the grant of